Good day, grade 7 learners. Once again, I am teacher Catherine Bravo, your mathematics teacher for this week's lesson on Mathematics 7. So welcome again to our Math 7 o'clock, and I am sure that you are very much ready with our lesson for this week. So last week, we have discussed the different ways of collecting data. But this time, what are we going to do when after collecting data? What do you think is the next step then? Okay, correct. So after a sample has been chosen and data were collected, the data obtained is unorganized. So, before we can draw conclusions from them, it must be first summarized and represented in a way that is easy to visualize and understand. That's why we have to organize our data. So for this week, we will be focusing on organization of data. And you are expected to organize data in a frequency distribution table. You heard it right. We will be having frequency distribution table. So what do you think is frequency distribution table? Is it familiar to you, or have you met this table before? If not, do not worry, because we will be discussing it. And I'm sure that you will learn something new in this video lesson. Let's get to know frequency distribution table. A frequency distribution table is a table that lists items and uses tally marks to record and show the number of times data values appeared. Okay, so frequency distribution table has 3 columns. This is an example of or an overview of a frequency distribution table. So as you can see, we have here 3 columns. We have the first column, which will contain the category or the variable or the class intervals for our collected data. And for the second one is the tally, the column for the tally. And lastly is the column for the frequency. So a frequency distribution, as well, just like what I said a while back, is composed of 3 columns. So let us have first the tally. So tally chart or tally is a simple way of recording and counting frequencies. So when we say tally, usually we record data in groups of 5s. I know that you are familiar with this. This is what we usually do when we are conducting the face-to-face election in our classes before, if you can still remember them. And each occurrence is shown by a tally mark, which is usually represented by a straight line. And every 5th tally is drawn diagonally to make a gate of 5. So when we have a tally, we are constructing vertical lines, and the fifth line will be a diagonal line. So the tallies can then be counted to give the frequency. So what is this frequency? When we say frequency, the frequency is the value or the number of times the data value occurs. So after we conduct or after we did the tallying, we will now be counting the tally marks, and then we are going to write it in number. So that will be the frequency. So let us now have some examples to visualize and to illustrate what is frequency distribution table. Let us have first the frequency distribution table for ungrouped data. We are conducting our data can be classified into ungrouped or grouped data. Ungrouped data has something to do with our data which are manageable to count. Okay? but there are also times that we have to conduct surveys among 100 people, 50 or more people, and in that case, we can no longer use frequency distribution table for ungrouped data on that part. So what? Let us focus first on ungrouped data. Okay, so here are the steps in constructing frequency distribution table for ungrouped data. The first one is write the categories in one column. That is the first column. And second step, tally the numbers in each category. Third, count the tally marks and write the frequency in the final column. Again, you have to write the categories. Second, tally the numbers. And third, write the frequency in the final column. We have here two examples. Let us have first the first one. Example 1, the title of our first example is Goals. So, Sam's team has scored the following numbers of goals in recent games. So, most probably this game or the goals that we are referring to here is the score in a soccer game. And here are the scores. We have 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 3, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4, 2, 2, and 3. So if you are going to count all of this, we can conclude that we have, or Sam's team has played 14 games. And let us now create the frequency distribution to analyze the data that we have gathered. Okay, I just arranged the data or the scores in a tabular manner so that we will be more organized. So here is the first thing that you have to do is to create this 3-column table. So as you can see, for the first column, we have here the scores. And then the second column is for the tally and then the frequency. So what have you observed on our given set of scores? Have you noticed that some scores are repeated, just like 2, the score 2 has appeared many times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay? So this is our goal why we are conducting frequency distribution table, or why we are doing frequency distribution table, so that we can summarize these scores for easier reference, and so that we can draw conclusions easier. So the first thing after creating the table is that you have to write the scores in descending order or in an organized order. So in our case, we are going to write 1. That will represent all the ones in our given data. And then what else? What other scores have appeared? So we have 2. We also have 3. What else? Okay, we also have 4. And then we also have 5. So after writing all the scores that appeared in our given data, we will now proceed to tallying. So in our case, here is how we will do the tallying. We will look at the table horizontally as we tally it. Okay? So the first score is 2. So I am going to mark or to put one tally mark on the row of 2. So I am going to write a straight line there. And then the second score is 3. So I am going to put a tally mark here. 3. And then we also have 1. So where am I going to put the tally mark? Okay, very good. I'll put it here. And then we also have 2. So another tally mark for this second call or this row. And then 1. Okay, 3. 2. 3, 4, 5, 4 again, 2. So we'll draw another line on this row, and then we also have 2 again. So since this 2 is already the 5th score, we will no longer put here a straight line or a straight tally mark. Instead of writing a straight tally mark or vertical tally mark, we will be having a diagonal tally mark. Okay? Lastly, we have 3. Okay, there. So we have 4 for that. As you can see, we have marked all of our given data. So the next things, we are done with the tallying. The next step that we are going to do is to count the frequency. So for the score 1, we are going to count the tally mark 1 and 2. So the frequency for this is 2. Sorry. This is 2. Okay. And then for number 2, we have 5. For the score 3, we have 4. And then for score 4, it appeared 2 times. And for number 5, it appeared once. So what can we conclude out of this frequency distribution table? So what are the meaning of this frequency? This frequency tells us that the number 1 or the score 1 appeared twice. Score 2 or some team scored 2 or scored 2 5 times out of their 14 games. 3, they scored 3 4 times within that 14 games. And they also scored 4 twice. And then 5, they scored 5 once only. Okay? So this simply tells that majority of their scores is 2 because it has the highest frequency. So to check if our frequency is correct, we can also total or add the frequency. If it summed up to 14, then we have correct, or we got the correct frequency. So let us add 2 plus 5 is 7 plus 4, 11 plus 2 is 13 plus 1, 14. Therefore, we have recorded all the scores correctly. But be careful when it comes to tallying. Sometimes we might put the tally mark on the wrong score. So just be careful with that. So as you can see, it is very easy. And also take note that we are not only dealing with numbers. Frequency distribution can also be used when representing or when arranging or organizing nominal data. Let's have the next example. Okay, example 2, which is entitled Let's Play. So we have here, I have surveyed students which online game they prefer or they play. Okay, so we have M, the code M for Mobile Legend, P for PUBG, D for Dota, and C for Call of Duty. I have interviewed or surveyed 20 students. Let us see what are their responses. Okay, so here are the responses of the 20 students. Let us now have a frequency distribution table for this. Okay, so the first column, once again, is for the variable or the category. So I am going to write here the online game. And then the second for the tally and the third for the frequency. So I have to write C, D, M, and P. C is for Call of Duty, D is for Dota, M for Mobile Legend, and P for PUBG. Let us now have the tallying. Again, let us do it horizontally. So let us mark first letter M. So I'm going to write there one tally mark, followed by P, and then C, M again, and then P, M again, M, C, then M, C again, and then we have the first four letter D, then C, D, C, and then D, and lastly C. Okay, so we are now done with tallying. So let us count the frequency. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we have 7 for that. Then D, 3. For letter M, we have 8 responses. And P, 2. So let us add this. If the total is 20, so 7 plus 3 plus 8 plus 2, the total is 20. Okay. Now, from the table or from the frequency distribution that we have created, what can you infer or what can you conclude out of this table? Okay. Majority of the students that were surveyed play Mobile Legend, followed by Call of Duty, and the list is the PUBG. I hope that by this time, you can now do the tallying and you can already construct a frequency distribution for ungrouped data. What if the data is more than 50? Because if we have data which are 10 to 20, these are still manageable. What if we already have 50 data to organize? Okay, sometimes it depends on the variable that we have. But if the variable that we have is more than 10 or more than 20, it is no longer advisable to have this frequency distribution for ungrouped data. That is now the time that we have to move to frequency distribution table for grouped data. So the steps in constructing frequency distribution table for group data are: first, determine the range. The range is the highest data minus the lowest data, or the number. Step 2, decide the number of groups, classes, or class intervals into which the data are to be grouped. So you can choose from 5 to 20, but more than 20 is no longer advisable. Okay, so just choose from 5 to 20. The third step is to determine the class width, which is represented by small letter I. So how do we do this? First, we have to divide the range by the number of desired classes. In step 4, list the lower and upper class limits of the first class interval. Step 5, list all the succeeding class intervals. And lastly, tally the data values in each class interval. Okay, so for our example, 40 grade 7 students were surveyed about what they think is the ideal age to have boyfriend. The following data shows the students' responses. Construct a group frequency distribution with 5 classes. So here are the scores. Okay, you may now screenshot this one for your reference. Okay. So let us now do the frequency distribution for this one. Step by step. So for the first step, again, we have to subtract the highest data and the lowest data. So as we can see, if you are going to scan the scores, the lowest data that I can see here is 13 and the highest data is 27. So we have to subtract these two to obtain range. So R is equal to 27 minus 13. So 27 minus 13 is 14. So this is the range. Again, this is the range, which is the difference of the highest data and the lowest data. Let's now have the second step. Decide the number of groups or classes. So from the problem that we have a while back, it is indicated that we are going to conduct or do a frequency distribution table with 5 classes. Now that we have identified the range and the desired number of classes, we will now determine the class width, which is represented by I, and to do that, we have to divide the range, which is 14, by the desired number of classes, which is 5. So if we are going to divide 14 and 5, 14 divided by 5 is 2.8. And we have to round off the data to obtain or the answer to obtain a whole number. So if we are going to round this off, we will be having 3. What is this 3? When are we going to use this? This is the difference or the number of scores in each class interval or in each group. So next, step 4, we will now create the table and then we will now write the intervals. 13 is known as the lower limit and 15 is the upper limit. Ma'am, how are we going to know what number are we going to start? So we can start with the lowest number, which is 13, and from 13 you are going to count 3 out of that from 13. So 3, because that is our class width. That is our class width. Okay, so from 13 we are going to count. So 13, 14, and then 15. So we already have 3 scores: 13, 14, 15, 1, 2, and 3. This is the class width, okay? The number of scores in each class interval, A. Now, what will be the next class interval? What do you think? We will just continue that. So from 15, what's the next number? We have 16. So from 16, you are going to count 3 numbers. So 16, 17, and 18. That is again 3. So therefore, the second class interval is 16 to 18. How about for the third class interval? What do you think is the third class interval? Very good. That is 19 to 21. 19 is the next step or the next number from 18. So you are going to count 3 again. 19, 20, 21. That is for our third class interval. The next class interval is 22 to 24. And lastly, we have 25 to 27. Let us check if we have created the number of class intervals, that is 5. So how many groups do we have? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. We have 5 groups or class intervals. So we have achieved our desired class interval, number of class groups or class interval. After that, we will now do the tallying. So just like what we did in the ungrouped data, we will now do the tallying again. So let's start with 18. So it is located in this class interval 16 to 18. So we are going to put the tally mark here, followed by 20. So where is the 20? Very good. It is located on the third class interval. Again, 20, 20, 20, 13, 18, 22, 26, 27, 16, 23, 24, 17, 15, 21, 17, 23, 16, 19, 20, 20, 25, 21, 21, 19, 24, 17, 20, 22, 16, 26, 17, 15, 20, 16, 19, 18, 26, 23. Okay, so after marking or creating the tally marks for all the data, we will now count or have the frequency. So for the first class, 1, 2, and 3. So we have 3 scores on that group. For our second group, 16 to 18, we have 11 scores. For 19 to 21, we have 14 scores. And then for 22 to 24, we have 7. And for 25 to 27, we have 5. So if we are going to tally this, we must have 40. 3 plus 11 is 14 plus 14 is 28 plus 7, 35 plus 5, 40. So we have tallied all the given scores. Again, this might be, sometimes this is confusing, but we have to focus when doing the frequency distribution table, especially for the group data. So before we proceed, I want you to take note of the following terms. So the class intervals, we have class intervals. I've mentioned this a while back. What are these class intervals? So the class intervals are this 13 to 15, 16 to 18, 19 to 21, 22 to 24, and 25 to 27. So we also have with these class intervals, we have the class limits, which is classified into lower limits. So the lower limits are the lower numbers in each class interval. So for 13 to 15, the lower limit is 13. 16 to 18, the lower limit is 16. 19 to 21, 19 is the lower limit. 20 to 24, 22, and 25 to 27, 25 is the other, or is the lower limit. The upper, on the other hand, the higher numbers for each class interval is what we call the upper limits. And before we say goodbye, please do take note of these terms, because these are very essential as you move on to our statistics class. First is the range, second class interval, next is the class width, lower limit, upper limit, and tally, and lastly the frequency. You can explore more and read more books if you wish to understand these terms better. And then, as your assignment, you have to explore the following terms, the class mark and class boundaries, because you will be using this as you move on to our next topic, which is graph. Again, this ends our video lesson for the week. I hope you learned a lot with this video. Until next time, bye!